The car had backed right up to an abandoned farmhouse, its rear bumper nearly kissing the wall. No skid marks, no driver inside. Just two unclaimed paychecks on the seat and a pair of prescription glasses. The rear window had been shattered from the inside out, as if someone was trying to escape. But there was no blood, no footprints, no trail leading away. That house sat quietly in rural Vermont, and no one could explain what had just happened. Some said it was an accident, others believed she walked away from her life. But her family knew better. Brianna had no reason to disappear. The 17-year-old had just passed her GED, with dreams of college and a future ahead. And then, on a March night in 2004, she vanished without a trace. More than 20 years later, police still haven't revealed the source of a mysterious DNA sample found in the car. And people are still asking, if this was murder, why didn't anyone hear her scream? Brianna Maitland was born in October 1986 in the quiet mountain valleys of Vermont. She grew up on a small farm with her parents and older brother, surrounded by rolling green hills and endless sky. From a young age, Brianna was different. She wasn't afraid to fall. She wasn't afraid to fight. And she definitely wasn't afraid to speak her mind. She started learning jujitsu in elementary school and got so good she once took down a boy twice her size. But Brianna wasn't loud or showy. She was soft-spoken, introspective, a little dreamy. She loved reading. She kept a journal. In one entry, she wrote, "I don't want to be swallowed by this small town." At 17, Brianna stood on the edge between girlhood and adulthood, trying to break free from the shadow of the farm, yet still carrying the loneliness of growing up. She had paused her traditional high school path to earn her GED, with plans to go further in her education. Instead of living with her parents, she moved in with friends, took a job at a local inn, and supported herself. Friends described her as both gentle and mysterious, the kind of person who could sit in silence for hours, then suddenly tell a story that left everyone speechless. But a few weeks before she disappeared, something shifted. She grew quieter, less open. Her eyes took on a distant, guarded look. One night in February, Brianna went to a party, and there she was attacked. An old friend, Kiali, suddenly struck her in front of a crowd. Brianna was left with bruises around her eye and cheek. She filed a police report. A court date was set. But when asked why she'd been attacked, she simply shook her head and said, "It's just an old thing." No one ever found out what that old thing was. Brianna never explained. After that, she began to pull away. She kept her journal entries private. One friend recalled, she seemed scared, but wouldn't say of who. Brianna's mother believed her daughter was under pressure, caught between growing up and feeling completely alone. Still, Brianna kept showing up to work. She kept studying for her GED. She kept smiling every time she called home. And then came March 19th, 2004, a day that seemed perfectly normal. That morning, Brianna completed the final section of her GED exam. She called her mom and asked to go out for lunch. They met at a small cafe near the school, talking about the future, about Brianna's dream of moving to New York. But as they were leaving the cafe, Brianna suddenly glanced out the window and walked away without saying a word. Her mother stood there, confused, because in that moment, she knew something had just changed. What she didn't know was that it would be the last time she'd ever see her daughter alive. The afternoon of March 19th, 2004, was clear and bright in Vermont. Brianna walked out of her final GED exam looking calm, even content. She had just completed the essay portion, the last step. If all went well, she'd soon be ready for a fresh start. Her mother, Kelly, was waiting outside. They went out for lunch together, a small reward after a long journey. They chose a quiet roadside cafe, just sandwiches and iced tea. They talked about the changing seasons, about Brianna's dream of applying to art school, about how she wanted her own car. It was all so normal, until something strange happened. While her mother was paying at the counter, Brianna stood by the window, her gaze fixed on the road outside. Kelly later recalled that in that moment, her daughter looked like she'd seen someone or was unsure whether to go out and meet them. Then, without explanation, Brianna said, "I'll be right back." Kelly didn't think much of it, but a few minutes later, Brianna returned, quiet, unreadable, and simply said, "I need to get back to Jillian's to get ready for work." She left earlier than usual, and no one ever found out who, if anyone, she met outside that cafe. Back at her friend Jillian Stout's house, where she had been staying, Brianna left a handwritten note on the kitchen counter. "Went to work. Be back after shift." That night's shift was at the Black Lantern Inn, an old roadside inn in Montgomery. Brianna worked as a waitress, and coworkers later said she seemed completely normal. She served tables, cleared dishes, and even laughed at some light teasing from customers. Around 11:20 p.m., her shift ended. Brianna said goodnight and left alone, driving off in her white Oldsmobile. Home was just a few minutes away. No snow that night, quiet roads, calm skies. But Brianna never made it back. The next morning, March 20th, a passing motorist called police about a car abandoned by the roadside beside an old, crumbling farmhouse. The car was backed in, its rear nearly touching the faded gray siding. A window had been shattered. The wooden board that once covered the back window had been knocked loose from the inside. On the front seat were 2 uncashed paychecks with Brianna Maitland's name. Her wallet was still inside, along with her ATM card, prescription meds, and her glasses. The doors were unlocked, headlights off, no sign of a crash. Police assumed it was just a car left by someone who'd been drinking and didn't want to drive home. They called a tow truck and never contacted her family. For the rest of that Saturday, March 20th, no one realized Brianna was missing. She hadn't returned to Jillian's like her note said, but her friend assumed she'd stayed elsewhere for the night. It wasn't unusual. But by Sunday night, with no sign of Brianna, no call, no message, Jillian began to worry. She phoned Brianna's mom, and the waiting began. Kelly immediately started calling around, friends, co-workers, hospitals. No one had seen her. No one knew where she was. By Monday morning, she called the police to file a missing persons report. But their initial response was to wait. Brianna was 17, but living independently. Police thought she'd likely left on her own, maybe upset, or just needing space. They didn't treat it as urgent. It wasn't until 5 days after Brianna disappeared that authorities connected the missing girl to the car they had already towed from the abandoned house. By then, the car had been sitting at an impound lot. Someone had rummaged through it. Some of her things had been disturbed. But what remained was enough to suggest something was very wrong. The 2 paychecks on the seat suggested she hadn't had time to cash them. Her ID, bank card, medication, all still there. These weren't things someone planning to leave behind would abandon. On the ground beside the car were faint scuff marks, scattered items, a bottle of water, a coin rolled away. The wooden board over the rear window had been pushed outward from inside the house. Someone, maybe Brianna, had tried to climb out through the broken glass. But if she was running, why was there no blood, no scream, no footprints in the dirt? Her family launched a search right away, printing posters, contacting local media. Police began an investigation, but the first few days were chaotic. There were no security cameras near the site, no eyewitnesses. No one had heard a thing. The questions began to pile up. Why had Brianna taken that old, barely used road that led to an abandoned farmhouse? Was someone following her? Or had she been trying to escape from someone none of us knew existed? Did someone lie in wait that night, just 1 mile from her job, hidden in the dark? And if someone was standing behind that broken window in that rotting wooden house, did Brianna know she was stepping into a place she'd never come back from? In the early days after Brianna vanished, no one knew where to begin. There was no blood at the scene, no phone, no cameras. It was as if Brianna had simply disappeared. But then, little details started to gnaw at her family. Something felt off, very off. The car. According to police, the vehicle was first seen around 4 p.m. on March 20th, almost 17 hours after Brianna left the Black Lantern Inn. It was backed tightly against the old farmhouse wall. No one saw it arrive. No one saw anyone get out. Some drivers passing by that night said they noticed the headlights still on around midnight. One recalled seeing someone standing near the car. Another thought the turn signal was flashing. But no one stopped. No one was sure, and there were no cameras to confirm any of it. Another strange fact. The inn where Brianna worked was less than 2 kilometers, barely a mile from the abandoned house. It was a straight, simple route. There was no reason to veer off down that old road, unless she was meeting someone. So, did she meet someone? Was someone waiting for her? Friends said Brianna had seemed different in the days leading up to her disappearance. She looked tired, dark circles under her eyes, dodging questions. One friend recalled, "I asked if something was wrong. She just smiled and said, 'It's fine. It'll all be better in a few days.'" But those few days never came. Police also found something tucked inside Brianna's personal notebook, a scrap of paper with a name, Kelly LaCrosse, the same girl who had assaulted her at a party just weeks earlier. It brought attention back to a detail many had forgotten. That attack wasn't just a schoolyard spat. Keali and Brianna had once been classmates, later best friends. But something, no one knows what, turned them into enemies. The blow came out of nowhere. Brianna ended up in the hospital. She agreed to testify at Keali's court hearing. So now the question became, was that fight more than just personal drama? Did Brianna know something? Something dangerous? Her family was adamant Brianna had no ties to drugs. But rumors began swirling that she knew people who did. One of those people was Ramon Ryans, a man who had rented a house near where Brianna lived. Not long after she vanished, Rhines was arrested for drug possession. No one could confirm how close they were, but a troubling possibility began to emerge. Even if Brianna was quiet, independent, and strong, maybe she had stepped into something far bigger than she realized. Nearly 3 weeks after she went missing, an anonymous call came into Vermont police. A man's voice, low and shaking. He claimed to have overheard a struggle on the night Brianna disappeared. Specifically, he said, she was hit inside the car, then 2 men dragged her behind the house. After that, it went silent. When officers asked more questions, the line went dead. The number didn't exist. The voice couldn't be traced. The statement wasn't legally usable, but it forced investigators to look at the scene differently. Behind the farmhouse was a patch of uneven land, once a vegetable garden, now just wild weeds. There, they found a strange depression in the soil, and a single earring, the same type Brianna was known to wear. But there was no DNA, no blood, nothing definitive. A month later, another anonymous source, this time a friend of Brianna's, came forward. They claimed she had been hanging around a group from New York, a group known for dealing drugs from a rental house just outside town, and one of them was Ramon Ryans. By the time police went looking, Ryans had already left Vermont, days before Brianna was officially reported missing. No one knew where he'd gone. Months later, he was arrested in New York for drug charges. In jail, when asked about Brianna, Ryans simply shrugged. "I didn't know her that well." Years later, a woman, claiming to be Ryan's ex-girlfriend, came forward with chilling testimony. "I once heard him say, there was this girl in Vermont who didn't know her place, and now nobody can find her." That statement expanded the investigation, but it hit another wall, no physical evidence. Police also questioned Keali Lacrosse, the girl who had attacked Brianna. Keali insisted, "I had nothing to do with it. We'd settled things. I hadn't seen her since court." She too left Vermont soon after. Everyone connected to Brianna had one thing in common. They either disappeared or went completely silent. No one talked. No one stayed in touch. Then, something broke the silence. In 2007, police announced they had recovered unidentified DNA on an item found in Brianna's car. They kept it quiet for years. But in 2022, that DNA was finally uploaded to a national database. It matched a man with a criminal history of kidnapping and sexual assault in the area near where Brianna disappeared. His name was never released. The records remained sealed. But it raised one enormous question. If police had a match to a known predator, then why hasn't anyone been arrested? In 2022, after nearly 2 decades without clear progress, the Vermont State Police made a startling announcement. The DNA sample found inside Brianna Maitland's car had finally been matched. It belonged to a man with a prior criminal record in a neighboring state. His name was never made public, but journalists quickly noticed a chilling pattern. A man previously investigated for violent attacks against women not far from where Brianna vanished had also disappeared from Vermont shortly after 2004. When asked for comment, police simply said, "We're exploring all possibilities." But for Brianna's family, after years of waiting, vague answers were no longer enough. Her father, Bruce Maitland, spoke out. "If this man is innocent, why was his DNA in my daughter's car, and why hasn't he come forward?" He began asking the bigger question. Had police known about this DNA match earlier and kept it quiet to avoid public panic? At a press conference, Bruce said, "We don't want apologies. We want the truth. My daughter deserves to be found." The public began to pay attention again. More than 18 years had passed, but the family's pain had never faded. They weren't looking to blame anyone. They just wanted someone to listen. Then, a forgotten clue suddenly resurfaced. A surveillance camera at a small gas station, just a few miles from where the car was found, had recorded a suspicious vehicle on the very night Brianna went missing. It wasn't her car. But in a few grainy frames, you could make out 2 figures, a man and a woman, standing near Brianna's vehicle before it turned down the road to the abandoned house. Police admitted the footage was too blurry for identification, but if they'd had it since 2004, why did it take nearly 20 years to mention it publicly? That silence fueled a growing suspicion, not just about potential suspects, but about how the entire investigation had been handled. Was it because Brianna was independent, lived alone, didn't have powerful connections, that her case wasn't treated as a priority? A local journalist asked the hard question. If Brianna had been the daughter of a politician or a bank executive, would her car have been towed away without a proper investigation? Because the twist in this case wasn't just about the DNA. The twist was that someone might have had a chance to save her, or at least uncover the truth, but missed it. And now, That silence may have erased the only trace that could have brought her home. Once news of the DNA match broke, true crime forums reignited. Reddit threads filled with new theories. Some blamed police. Others turned suspicion on those closest to Brianna, her roommate, her attacker, even coworkers at the inn. An anonymous account posted a photo supposedly taken at the impound lot in 2004. In the image, a faint mud print, shaped like a hand, was visible on the back of Brianna's car. Police had never mentioned this detail. No one could verify if the photo was real, but it sparked a chilling question. If someone left a handprint on that car, did they take her while she was still alive? Old theories were reopened. Every action was re-examined. A witness once claimed to have heard a scream, thin as the wind, coming from behind the fields that night. At the time, police dismissed it. It couldn't be verified. Now, that voice came back, like an echo of what never should have been ignored. Organizations dedicated to finding the missing began asking, why wasn't there a full-scale search in those critical first 48 hours? Why didn't anyone check local cameras? Why did it take nearly 20 years to enter that DNA into the system? The Vermont State Police remained tight-lipped. In one interview, a spokesperson said, "We're following procedure. Some details cannot be shared due to the ongoing nature of the case. But while procedure dragged on, trust began to vanish." Once again, Bruce Maitland stood before reporters. His face harder now, but his voice still cracked the way it had 18 years earlier. "I'm not asking for someone to blame," he said. "I'm asking that my daughter not be forgotten." Then, he held up a small, yellowing slip of paper. The handwritten note Brianna left on the kitchen table before she left for work that night. Just one line. "Went to work, be back after shift." The ink had faded, the paper curled at the edges, but every letter was still visible. It was her final promise, one she never got to keep. And now, in corners of the internet and quiet conversations across the country, a new question is being whispered. How many other Briannas have vanished and been forgotten before anyone even remembered their names? Nearly 2 decades after Brianna Maitland vanished, a new feeling began to settle in. Not hope, not even patience, but a quiet, heavy sense of disorientation. Every theory that once seemed solid had been chipped away by time. Police had once suggested she might have left voluntarily, but she left behind everything. Her ID, money, glasses, even her paychecks. Her family suspected a kidnapping, but there was no clear evidence, no ransom note. No one ever claimed responsibility. And the drug ring theories? Over time, they began to crumble. Key people were either ruled out, arrested, or dead. Then in 2012, a woman came forward with a haunting story. She claimed she had been held captive in a remote cabin near the Vermont border, and that another girl, who looked like Brianna, had been there too. She remembered one detail clearly. The man had a tattoo on his left wrist. He always blasted loud music, like he was trying to cover up the noise inside. But when police investigated the area, there was nothing. No matching cabin, no tattooed man, no trace of Brianna. The woman was later diagnosed with mild psychiatric issues. Her statement vanished into doubt. But for Bruce, Brianna's father, even the most fragile lead was still a thread worth following. He once said, "I don't care if it's true or not. I just need to know someone still remembers my daughter." More calls trickled in over the years. Someone claimed they'd seen her working as a waitress in Arizona. Another said they spotted her at a gas station in Maine, slouched posture, hollow eyes. One even claimed, "She's living under a new name, too scared to come back." But none of these tips came with proof. No security footage, no confirmed sightings. Just memories blurred by time, somewhere between real and imagined. Eventually, even Brianna's own family began to ask themselves the unthinkable. Could she be gone? Could this entire search, everything they'd fought for, have been chasing a ghost? But even so, they couldn't let go. Because if they gave up, who else would remember her name in a world that was starting to forget? In 2023, an independent journalist named Emily Chen reopened the case files. She wasn't with a major outlet, just a woman who lived in Vermont, who'd once gone to the same high school as Brianna. She recalled, "I still remember the day Brianna helped me pick up my books after I fell in the hallway. No one else remembers her, so I thought I'd try." Emily requested access to public records, crime scene photos, the tow report, even a copy of the vehicle search inventory. And in that paperwork, she found a small detail. A blue hair tie wedged between the front seat and gear shift of Brianna's car. Police had noted it, but never tested it. They said it showed no obvious signs of relevance. Emily checked with Brianna's mother. Her response was quiet, but certain. "Brianna never wore that color. That wasn't hers." That hair tie had sat untouched in an evidence locker for 19 years. Emily contacted an independent lab and asked them to test it for DNA. The result? There was biological material on it, but it didn't match Brianna. And it didn't match the known suspect. Someone else had been in that car that night. No match in national databases. No match to any known criminals. No name ever connected to the case. And that was the second twist. Maybe this wasn't about drug dealers. Maybe it wasn't someone who had been questioned, arrested, or watched. Maybe it was someone completely unknown. Someone who had never been caught. Someone who might still be out there, going to work, raising kids, waving to neighbors each morning. Emily published her findings online. They went viral. Hundreds of people began combing through old yearbooks, classmate lists, anyone who had once known Brianna. But it was all speculation. The police refused to comment. Still, in one post, Emily wrote, "If that hair tie had been tested in 2004, maybe Brianna would have been found. Maybe. But no one knows anymore. Because after all these years, that blue fabric is just a faint scrap in the back corner of an evidence locker, dim under fluorescent light, a clue too small to matter, or maybe the only key left, to the name no one ever dared to say out loud. If you ever find yourself in Montgomery, Vermont in the fall, you'll see the forests burn bright with red maple leaves stretching endlessly into the hills. Dirt roads wind quietly through the countryside. Wooden homes sit scattered across the fields. Time moves slowly there. But there used to be a house, long since torn down, that once marked the beginning of a question no one has ever answered. The house where Brianna Maitland disappeared stood as a monument to silence. No one lived there. No one rebuilt it. It simply existed, like a ghost. And then, over time, it was demolished. No more walls, no more shadowy windows, not even the mark on the siding where her car once backed in. The physical world faded. What remained were memories, a slip of handwritten paper, a pair of glasses without an owner, a car with no driver, and so many people who once crossed paths with Brianna, but none who truly knew who she was that night. Her family still lives in Vermont. Every year, they hold a small candlelight vigil. No cameras, no crowds, just a few people standing in the cold, holding photos of Brianna, their eyes fixed on the field where everything began. When asked, her mother simply says, "I don't want anyone punished. I just want my girl brought home, even if it's just a part of her." But no one comes home. Nothing ever comes home. And maybe that's the cruelest thing of all. Not death, but the not knowing, stretched across 20 years, eating away at the people left behind. They say time heals all things. But for some families, time is just the slow erasure of hope, month by month, year by year, as new cases rise and Brianna's name fades. Almost. Because you're hearing this story now, and if you've made it this far, maybe you've felt what her family once felt, that something isn't right, that someone knows the truth, and that sometimes justice doesn't come in a courtroom, but in a memory kept alive. A wall knocked down by a car can't be rebuilt, but a name, if spoken often enough, is never truly forgotten.